The gate area buzzed with the usual pre-boarding chatter, rolling suitcases, restless kids, muffled phone calls, but in the far corner, near gate C-27, one man sat alone. Noah Briggs kept his eyes low, his burned hands folded tightly around a well-worn black duffel bag resting on his lap. His face, once handsome and strong-jawed, was now a quilt of scar tissue, melted and twisted by fire years ago. A skin graft across his left cheek had left a patchy pink contrast to the rougher skin along his jaw. He didn't hide it. He'd stopped trying a long time ago. But still, he noticed the stares. He was wearing a plain olive drab jacket, fraying at the sleeves, and faded jeans. No cap, no sunglasses. Just silence. A child, maybe 5 years old, wandered too close, smiling innocently. "Hi," the boy chirped, pointing. "What happened to your face?" The mother's eyes widened. "Ryan," she snapped, pulling the child away. "Don't stare. Let's go." Noah didn't flinch. He simply nodded softly. He didn't blame the kid. Kids were honest. It was the adults who wrapped their discomfort in whispers and sideways glances. Over the intercom, a voice crackled. "Flight 227 to Denver, now boarding Group A." Noah's ticket was Group B, but the gate agent had already waved him over earlier with a hushed kindness. "Sir, you can pre-board if you'd like. You've earned it." He hadn't answered, just nodded again. As he stood, the duffel slid slightly from his lap and hit the floor with a thud. He bent to pick it up, his stiff fingers struggling with the zipper. A couple seated nearby glanced at him, the woman nudging her husband and whispering something under her breath. Noah had gotten used to this version of the world, a world where his presence made people uncomfortable, where they assumed things about him before he opened his mouth. Most didn't know the story behind the scars. Most didn't ask. He stepped forward toward the boarding lane, slowly, deliberately. His gait was steady, though there was a slight limp in the left leg, the result of the same roadside bomb that had lit his world on fire. It had been Afghanistan, 2009. A supply run ambushed by an IED. 3 soldiers dead, 1 burned beyond recognition, and, somehow, still breathing. Noah made it to the agent at the gate. She gave him a professional but warm smile. "Mr. Briggs," she asked, glancing at his boarding pass, "we've noted your seat. If there's anything you need during the flight, just let us know." He nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Are you traveling for business or funeral?" he said flatly. The agent's face softened. "I'm sorry. Old friend," he added. "Marine. Fell last week. Friendly fire." She didn't know what to say after that. Neither did he, so he turned and walked down the jet bridge. As Noah stepped into the narrow tunnel toward the plane, he became acutely aware of how loud the silence was. The dull hum of the air conditioning, the muted rubber squeak of his boots on the floor, the rustle of his duffel against his hip. His heart was steady, but his thoughts wandered. He hadn't flown commercial in years. Not since the injury. Crowds made him uneasy. Confined spaces even more so. But he couldn't miss this funeral. Not for Sergeant Ramirez. Ramirez had saved his life more than once, dragging him from wreckage, keeping him awake with bad jokes, covering him during firefights. And now, it was Noah's turn to show up, even if it meant walking into the kind of space that fed his nightmares. He entered the aircraft slowly. A young blonde flight attendant greeted him, glancing quickly at his face before putting on a forced smile. "Welcome aboard, sir," she said. He nodded again, wordless, and made his way to row 24, window seat. People watched him as he walked. He could feel it. The silence behind him was deafening. The occasional cough, the shifting of a bag, those tiny sounds became sharp in his ears. He slid into his seat, the narrow space compressing his broad shoulders. The armrest pressed against his ribs, and he exhaled slowly, adjusting. He took out a small item from his jacket pocket, a worn silver lighter. It didn't work anymore, but he kept it anyway. Ramirez had given it to him after their first deployment. "Briggs," Ramirez had joked back then, "in case you need to light a fire under your own butt." Noah smiled faintly at the memory. He heard murmurs nearby. "Is that a burn victim?" someone whispered. He didn't turn to look. He'd learned not to. Suddenly, he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned. It was the blonde flight attendant again. Her expression was tight, almost as if she was forcing herself to look at him. "Sir, Just a reminder, please keep the window shade down for takeoff, she said curtly. There are kids on board. He blinked at her. Excuse me. She didn't repeat it. She just walked away briskly. Noah looked out of the window. The late afternoon sun was casting golden streaks across the tarmac. He slowly pulled the shade halfway down, not because she asked, but because the light hurt his eyes sometimes. He closed his hand around the silver lighter. Outside, the fuel truck rolled away. The luggage carts clattered in the distance. Inside, Noah waited. He didn't know yet that this flight would change everything. The aircraft ascended into the pale orange sky, its engines humming softly beneath the fuselage. Inside, the cabin lights dimmed as the plane leveled off. Noah Briggs sat still, shoulders slightly hunched, staring blankly at the window's shade. His breath fogged faintly on the cool pane. He hadn't said a word since boarding. The narrow seat pressed against his frame, and his left knee, with its shrapnel scars and fused metal joint, throbbed with dull persistence. He reached into his jacket, fingers curling around his dog tags. The metal was cool and familiar, something to ground him. Suddenly, a tray cart rattled down the aisle, announcing the start of beverage service. The same blonde flight attendant, Lori, was maneuvering the cart. Her smile was mechanical, the kind worn by those tired of service but addicted to control. "Would you like a drink, sir?" she asked as she stopped at his row. Her eyes scanned the tray rather than his face. Noah nodded. "Water, please." She poured it swiftly and handed it over without a word of thanks. But then she hesitated. Her eyes flicked up, their gaze locked. Just for a moment, something in her expression shifted as if the reality of his scars finally landed. Her smile flattened. "Next time," she said under her breath, almost casual, "you might want to consider a seat with a little more privacy." Noah tilted his head. "Excuse me?" She shrugged, brushing non-existent lint from her uniform. "Just saying, some of the passengers are uncomfortable. It's a full flight. Lots of children. I had one mom ask if we could dim the lights back here." The words hung in the air like a slap. Noah's grip on his plastic cup tightened. The water inside barely trembled, but his fingers did. He didn't speak. Lori raised a brow as if expecting a reaction. When none came, she offered a plastic smile. "Enjoy your flight," she said before moving down the aisle. The woman in the seat beside Noah, a middle-aged woman in business attire, gave a sympathetic glance but said nothing. She clutched her coffee and looked away, clearly wanting no part of whatever just happened. Noah leaned back, his jaw clenched. A dozen thoughts rose, collided, and fell apart in his head, but none escaped his lips. What would be the point? He'd heard it before. In malls, in restaurants, in parks. People never said it directly. They just wrapped cruelty in politeness. He looked down at his hands. The skin across the knuckles was tight, grafted over tendons that didn't move the same anymore. A reminder of how much he had lost. And now, this? He adjusted his seatbelt with difficulty, the strap catching on the stiff angle of his hip brace. 10 minutes passed. The cart returned. This time, Lori was alone. She paused again at his row, this time pretending to straighten a napkin on the tray table in front of him. "Sir," she said in a low voice, "if you need anything, maybe just press the button. That way we won't startle the other passengers." Noah turned toward her, expression neutral. "I served 3 tours in Afghanistan," he said slowly. "I don't startle easy." She froze, surprised he spoke. Before she could respond, a patch of turbulence shook the plane slightly. The cart jolted, and a cup of cranberry juice tipped, spilling partially over the cart's edge and onto Noah's jeans. Lori gasped and grabbed a napkin. Oh dear, that's... sorry." Noah wiped his lap slowly, methodically. The juice had soaked into the denim, a cold, wet stain that spread across his thigh. Lori hovered awkwardly. "Maybe I could get you a change of... wait, never mind." She gave a quick half smile and wheeled the cart away in haste. From a few rows back, a junior flight attendant, short, red-haired, maybe early 20s, had watched the exchange. Her name tag read Katie. She'd caught the tone, the body language, the deliberate disrespect. Katie waited until Lori passed her on the way back to the galley. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly. Lori scoffed. "That guy? Sitting there like he's royalty. The way he looks makes people lose their appetite." Katie stared at her. "You serious?" Lori shrugged. "I'm just saying what people think." Katie didn't respond, but her mouth tightened. She waited a moment, then stepped away discreetly and picked up the interphone. A call to the cockpit. "Captain Reynolds," she asked softly when the line picked up. "Yes, go ahead," came the calm voice of the pilot. "Sir, I think we've got a situation. Passenger in row 24A. Disabled vet, one of ours. I think he's being mistreated." There was silence on the line for a beat longer than expected. "Describe him," the pilot said finally. Katie did. Scars. Limp. Quiet. Alone. Another pause. "Name on the manifest?" he asked. Katie read it off her tablet. "Noah Briggs." This time the silence stretched even longer. Then came the pilot's voice, quieter, more deliberate. "Thank you, Katie. I'll take care of it." Up in the cockpit, Captain Michael Reynolds stared at the name on the flight manifest. It wasn't a name he'd heard in years. Not since a screaming July afternoon in 2009 when he'd been flying a medevac chopper outside Kandahar. "Incoming. We've got 3 wounded, 1 burned bad." He remembered the call like it was yesterday. The stench of fuel, the screams, the wreckage, and the soldier, one of them half-charred, barely breathing, clutching another man's dog tags in his bloody fist. Noah Briggs. Michael sat back in his seat, the hum of autopilot steady in his ears. He'd always wondered if Briggs had survived. The last time he saw him, they were rushing to a field hospital, and Michael was running through the sky with death in the back seat. And now, here he was, sitting 20 feet behind him, and being disrespected. The pilot's jaw clenched. He tapped the intercom. "Get Lori up here, now." If this story moved you, like, comment, respect, and share it with someone who's forgotten what real heroism looks like. Subscribe for more powerful stories that restore humanity. Lori hesitated as she stood outside the cockpit, smoothing her skirt and fixing her expression into something professional. The pilot had summoned her, but she wasn't sure why. There hadn't been any incidents. No one had pressed the call button, and everyone was seated quietly, especially that burned man in 24A. She knocked lightly. The cockpit door unlatched with a metallic click, and First Officer Jenkins opened it partway. "Captain wants a word." Lori stepped inside. Captain Michael Reynolds sat straight in his chair, eyes calm but firm. The control panel flickered gently beside him, and above, the faint hum of the engines blended with static from the air traffic radio. He gestured to the small jump seat behind him. "Have a seat, Lori." She sat, trying to maintain composure. "Something happened with a passenger?" he asked, evenly. She blinked. "Sir?" "I got a call from Katie," Reynolds said, folding his hands. "She mentioned a veteran in 24A, Noah Briggs." Lori hesitated, a slight laugh escaping. "Oh, him. Yes, he's on board. I didn't know you were... Do you know who he is?" Lori's smile faded slightly. "No, sir. I just knew he was different. Some passengers looked uncomfortable. I was trying to keep things smooth." "By telling him he should sit in privacy?" She stiffened. "And suggesting he avoid pressing the call button, that he might startle others?" She began, flustered. "It wasn't meant that way. I just thought..." Reynolds cut her off. "I met Noah Briggs in 2009. He was on the ground in Afghanistan when I flew a medevac chopper into a hot zone. He'd been hit by an IED. Face was barely there. Most men wouldn't have made it 5 minutes. He stayed conscious the entire flight. You know why?" She swallowed. "Because the man next to him was already dead, and Noah thought if he passed out, the medics wouldn't find the dog tags the dead Marine had handed him." Lori's face paled. "I watched that man hold another soldier's memory in his hand while his own skin was burning off," Reynolds said, voice heavy. "I've flown generals, I've flown senators, but I've never flown a man braver than Noah Briggs." The cockpit went silent. Reynolds turned slightly in his chair. "And today he got told he makes people lose their appetite. On my plane." Lori looked down. Her lip trembled, but she forced it steady. "I didn't mean to offend him. I thought I was protecting the comfort of other passengers." Reynolds leaned forward, voice hardening. "His scars were earned. His silence is humility. His presence is an honor. The discomfort in this cabin doesn't come from him. It comes from ignorance." Lori opened her mouth to respond but found no words. Reynolds stood and reached for the intercom handset. "I'll be making an announcement," he said firmly. "You're going to stand beside me for it." She blinked. "Captain, He gave her a look that ended the protest. "You'll stand beside me." Back in the cabin, the atmosphere was routine. Tray tables down, earbuds in, passengers dozing off or flipping through in-flight magazines. Noah sat motionless, staring at the horizon through the half-raised window shade. He hadn't touched the rest of his water. The intercom beeped overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the pilot's voice, smooth but louder than usual. "This is your captain speaking. I want to take a moment to recognize someone very special on board." Some passengers stirred, looking up. Seated in 24A is Noah Briggs. He's not just another traveler. He's a United States Marine who survived a direct IED blast during his third deployment to Afghanistan. His actions under fire saved lives, including the life of the man who's speaking to you now. Heads began turning. Murmurs spread across rows. "When I flew Noah out of a war zone in 2009, the pilot continued, "he was so badly burned, I didn't think he'd make it to the hospital. But he did. And not only did he survive, he walked back into life with dignity and silence most of us can't begin to fathom." In row 24, Noah froze. His fingers tightened around his dog tags. "I want to make it crystal clear," Reynolds said, voice thickening, "that any discomfort aboard this flight belongs not to him, but to anyone who sees bravery and mistakes it for ugliness." There was stunned silence. The captain went on. "Mr. Briggs, on behalf of this crew, and on behalf of every veteran who's ever been overlooked, dismissed, or insulted, I apologize, and I thank you." A beat. Then one clap. Then two. Then the sound rolled like thunder through the cabin. Row by row, passengers began applauding, some standing. A woman near the back wiped her eyes. A teenage boy saluted awkwardly. Even the businessman in 12C stood and shouted, "Semper Fi!" Noah stared down at his lap, stunned. Katie approached him slowly. "Mr. Briggs, the captain would like you to join him in the cockpit for the remainder of the flight. He says the co-pilot owes you a coffee." Noah blinked. "I'm not a hero," he murmured. Katie smiled gently. "You didn't need to be one. You just needed to show up. And you did." He rose, unsteady but tall. As he walked up the aisle, the clapping didn't stop. The businessman held out a hand. Noah shook it. A mother placed her child's small palm in his. A flight attendant, Lori, stood near the front, eyes red, unable to meet his gaze. He passed her without a word. Inside the cockpit, Captain Reynolds stood and embraced him. "It's good to see you, Marine." Noah nodded, the corners of his eyes glistening. "Didn't expect to be in a cockpit again." "Well," Reynolds grinned, gesturing to the seat. "How about front row this time?" Noah sat, stunned by the view. Miles of sky in every direction. Freedom. Light. Reynolds handed him a fresh coffee, black, just the way Marines drank it. They sat together in silence. And for the first time in a long while, Noah Briggs didn't feel stared at. He felt seen. If this story moved you, like, comment, respect, and share it with someone who's forgotten what real heroism looks like. Subscribe for more powerful stories that restore humanity. The cockpit of the Airbus A320 had never felt more alive to Captain Michael Reynolds. The dials glowed faint amber in the low cabin light, and the horizon ahead stretched in endless sapphire. But today, the view wasn't what mattered. It was the man sitting beside him. Noah Briggs, now quietly sipping black coffee in the co-pilot's seat, seemed both out of place and exactly where he belonged. His burned skin caught the reflection of the controls, rough but proud. He hadn't said much since stepping in, but his silence didn't need to be filled. "Still remember how to read these?" Reynolds asked, breaking the stillness with a grin. Noah chuckled softly. "Not sure I ever did. I was usually in the back of the bird hoping the pilot didn't screw up." Reynolds laughed. "Well, good news. I haven't screwed up in over a decade. I was in the ICU last time you flew me." "I remember," the captain said. His voice softened. "You were holding someone else's tags. Took 4 nurses to pry them from your hand." Noah stared ahead, his eyes tracing the curve of the clouds. "That was Mason," he murmured. "He didn't make it. Told me not to let his mama forget him. I promised." "You kept that promise." Noah nodded. "Went to Georgia a year later. Told her face to face. Gave her the tags. She cried for an hour, then made me stay for dinner." Reynolds glanced at him, something heavy in his gaze. "You did more than most ever would." Noah shrugged. "Doesn't feel like enough. Feels like surviving was the easy part. Living with it, that's harder." The cockpit went quiet again. Then the radio crackled with a routine transmission from air traffic control. Reynolds responded calmly, adjusting their course slightly. Noah looked out at the sky again. This view. I'd forgotten how peaceful it is up here. Reynolds leaned back. You know, I flew a lot of injured soldiers out of hellholes, but I only remembered a few names. Yours stuck. Noah looked at him. You were the only one who never screamed, Reynolds continued. Your skin was melting, Noah. Your lungs were cooked, but all you said, over and over, was, "Tell my mom I'm okay. Tell Mason's mom he was brave." That kind of courage doesn't disappear when the war ends. Noah shifted in his seat. His eyes were glassy now, but he didn't blink them away. I didn't think I deserved to be remembered, he admitted. Reynolds reached forward and opened a small compartment above the controls. Inside was a folded American flag, creased and spotless. He pulled it out carefully and placed it on the panel between them. This was flown in my cockpit the day I brought you out of Kandahar, he said quietly. I've carried it on every flight since. It's yours. Noah stared at it. The same flag, the same day. He reached out slowly as though touching something sacred. When his fingers brushed the fabric, his breath hitched. I don't know what to say, he whispered. You don't need to, Reynolds replied. They sat in silence again, the sky stretching endlessly before them. The hum of the engines became a soft rhythm beneath their feet. Back in the cabin, passengers whispered and peeked toward the cockpit. Many were still stunned by the captain's earlier announcement. A few had asked flight attendants if the story was real. It was too noble, too cinematic to be true. Katie, now near the front galley, answered gently each time. Yes, he's a real hero. We're lucky to have him on board. Near the jump seat, Lori stood frozen. She hadn't said a word since the announcement. Her cheeks burned with shame. She wanted to apologize, wanted to say something, anything, to undo the damage. But how do you speak to someone after you've diminished their dignity? How do you approach a man you treated like a burden, only to discover he once carried half a battlefield on his back? Eventually, she stepped forward and quietly knocked on the cockpit door. The first officer opened it. I'd like to speak to Mr. Briggs, she said softly. Reynolds heard her and gave a nod. The door opened wider. Noah turned in his seat and saw her. His face was unreadable. Lori swallowed hard. Mr. Briggs, I owe you an apology. Noah said nothing. I didn't understand, she continued. I saw your scars and forgot to see the man. I tried to manage discomfort instead of honoring sacrifice. I was wrong. Still silent, Noah studied her. I don't expect forgiveness, she added, but I wanted you to hear it from me. No excuses, just, I'm sorry. Noah's eyes didn't blink. He let the silence linger, long enough for her to feel the full weight of it. Then he spoke, voice low. Next time you see someone like me, don't lower your eyes. Don't pretend we're invisible. We paid a price to be seen. Lori nodded slowly. You're right. I won't forget that. Noah turned back toward the horizon. She stepped back, the door closing behind her. Inside the cockpit, Reynolds broke the silence once more. First time I've seen her quiet, he joked. Noah didn't laugh, but a faint smile touched the corner of his lips. The flag rested on his lap now. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden light over the clouds and filling the cockpit with a soft amber glow. I never thought I'd be here again, Noah murmured, flying high, looking ahead. Reynolds looked over. You're not flying, he said. You're soaring. The seatbelt sign chimed on, and the familiar voice of Captain Reynolds echoed through the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our descent shortly. We ask that you return your seats to the upright position and stow all tray tables. And, before we land, I have one final note. A hush fell over the cabin. Even the hum of overhead vents seemed to soften. Today, we flew not just across miles of sky. We flew alongside a man who reminds us what honor truly looks like. Noah Briggs, United States Marine, burned in combat, quiet in presence, but louder in character than most of us will ever be. Passengers turned again toward 24A, now empty. Noah remained in the cockpit where the world outside still stretched wide and free. He didn't ask for recognition. He never raised his voice, but his silence told a story worth more than 1,000 medals. And to anyone who may have forgotten how to treat heroes, today was a reminder, a beat. On behalf of this crew and this airline, we offer our deepest gratitude and our apology. The intercom clicked off. The aircraft descended in smooth silence, the city lights twinkling beneath them like stars trying to meet the sky. As the plane touched down, soft applause spread through the cabin again, not for a landing, but for the man they now knew. Once at the gate, the door opened, and Captain Reynolds himself appeared first. Behind him, Noah Briggs. He didn't carry much. Just a small bag and the folded flag tucked under his arm. Every passenger remained seated, watching him walk the aisle. This time, there were no averted eyes, no discomfort, only respect. A woman near the front whispered, "Thank you." A young boy saluted again. Even Lori, standing by the exit, placed a hand over her heart as he passed. Outside on the tarmac, 2 ground crew members stood at attention. One snapped a salute as Noah descended the jet bridge. The world hadn't changed, but for a few hundred people on Flight 237, it had been reminded of something crucial. Scars don't make a man less. Sometimes they're the mark of someone who stood between danger and the rest of us, and chose to stay standing, even when it burned. If this story moved you, like, comment, respect, and share it with someone who's forgotten what real heroism looks like. Subscribe for more powerful stories that restore humanity.